The cutting wind of the English Channel carries not only the salt of the sea, but the weight of silence. It blows cold and merciless over the grey, restless waters, lifting crests of white foam that crash, furious, against the silent cliffs of an England waiting. On the coast, wrapped in a pale, ghostly mist, unfolds a spectacle that confuses the senses and defies logic. Row upon endless row of Sherman tanks, as imposing as steel rhinoceroses. Thunderbolt aircraft with their aggressive wings and robust transport trucks line up with martial precision across fields transformed into mud. Their silhouettes, casting long, distorted shadows over the soaked earth, are a promise of overwhelming might. But pause, listen closely. Something is profoundly wrong. There is no guttural roar of diesel engines, no sharp smell of burnt oil or men's sweat. No chatter of radios, no shouted commands, no ceaseless movement of soldiers preparing for the end of the world. Only the constant, solitary sound of the wind, whistling a grim melody through hollow, empty structures. Touch one of these tanks and you will not feel the heat of living metal, but the cold softness of inflatable rubber. These are not the weapons of a superpower, they are ghosts. Ghosts meticulously crafted from plywood, canvas, and air, held together by metal rods, a vast army of illusion. This daring creation was not a mere magic trick. It was the central weapon of a war, fought not only on the battlefield, but in the most fertile territory of the human mind, the realm of doubt and certainty. This is the story of Operation Fortitude, the greatest and boldest bluff in military history. A complex tapestry woven with threads of lies, so convincing that the loom itself was the German high command, and whose final pattern would be indelibly painted with the blood of the real invasion on the beaches of Normandy. As the morning fog lifts, revealing the fragile and almost pathetic nature of these ghost armies, in a quiet, austere office in the heart of London, a man contemplates a map of Europe pinned with a constellation of colored markers. His name is Juan Pujol Garcia, an ordinary Spaniard with an extraordinary conviction. He hated fascism and the Nazis with a passion so deep, so visceral, that he refused passivity. Instead of merely hating, he chose to act in a way only a genius of deception could conceive. He became a double agent. To the Germans, he was Arabelle, their brightest and most reliable star on English soil, a master spy commanding an impressive network of 27 agents. What the Abwehr analysts in Hamburg, proud of their efficiency, could never imagine was that every one of those 27 agents was fiction. Born entirely from Pujol's fertile mind, they did not drink in pubs or collect secrets at docks. They lived and died in the coded messages he sent. Every transmission from Pujol was a masterpiece of plausibility. He did not lie crudely. He fed the Germans a steady diet of meticulously fabricated information, seasoned with insignificant truths for flavor. He reported troop movements that never existed, ship landings that never occurred, shortages of equipment that, in reality, were stacked in industrial quantities across England. Each message was a thread, woven into a tapestry of deception so vast, so monumental, that the German mind, trained in Cartesian logic and order, was unable to conceive of its falsehood. They became victims of their own certainty. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, another master of deception, of a completely different kind, entered the stage. In a Hollywood studio, far from the fields of battle, a frustrated film director, whose name history has not preserved, but whose anonymous genius became immortal, gathered his crew of set designers, carpenters, and painters. They were not filming a western or a period drama. They were building a port. Not a real port, of course, but a replica convincing enough to fool the reconnaissance lenses of the dreaded Luftwaffe. Erected on the busy docks of Dover, at the narrowest and therefore most logical invasion point of the Channel, a world of illusion took shape. Its mission, to create irrefutable evidence that the U.S. First Army Group, under the fierce and aggressive General George S. Patton, was assembling for the decisive blow through the Pas-de-Calais. They built rubber tanks that 2 men could lift with one hand, canvas aircraft that deflated with a single bullet hole, warships made of scaffolding and painted screens which, seen from thousands of feet in the air, looked like a terrifying ghost fleet, an army of nightmares ready to strike. It was the ultimate theater of war, and the Germans had front row seats. And the Germans watched, their powerful lenses fixed on this elaborate stage. They saw exactly what they wanted to see, what their own military doctrine told them to see. The Pas-de-Calais was the obvious path, shortest, fastest, most strategically sound. Their rigid, predictable mindset could not accept that the Allies would choose the more distant beaches, with treacherous waters and the formidable defences of Normandy. The mental trap thus closed with an audible snap. To complete the illusion, a symphony of deceit flooded the airwaves. Trained radio operators, their voices laden with meticulously crafted urgency, transmitted orders to phantom divisions, discussed logistics problems of convoys that never moved. They simulated the organized chaos of a bustling headquarters, knowing full well that German electronic ears were glued to every syllable, every burst of static. Each transmission was a note in the score of a grand opera of deception, composed by masters of illusion and performed before an audience convinced it was witnessing the enemy's deepest secrets. While the phantom army postured and threatened in Dover, the real armies, the ones of flesh and bone, tempered steel and gunpowder, gathered in absolute secrecy in southwest England. Their movements were hidden under the impenetrable cloak of night and fierce security. They were the real fist, clenched and powerful, hidden behind the back, while the ghost hand, open and conspicuous, stole every glance. The resounding success of this bluff can be measured not by a statistic, but by a catastrophic decision of the German High Command. The feared Panzer Group West, the armored spearhead, meant to hurl the invaders back into the sea, was deliberately held in reserve, far from the beaches of Normandy. Its deployment was chained to bureaucracy, requiring the personal authorization of one man, Adolf Hitler, and the Führer, intoxicated by Arabelle's consistent lies and hypnotized by the theater in Dover, believed with all certainty that the true attack would strike at Calais. When the first chaotic reports of the Normandy landings reached the Wolf's lair in Rastenburg on the early morning of June 6th, they were met with skepticism and disdain. A diversion, the officers declared, a bluff to draw our forces away from Calais. Precious hours, and then crucial minutes, bled away into the bleak landscape of bureaucratic jealousy and paranoia fueled by deception. Even Rommel, the desert fox, whose tactical instinct was legendary, was absent. Convinced by the bad weather that no invasion was imminent, he was in Germany, presenting his wife with a pair of Parisian shoes for her birthday. His sharp intuition had been dulled by the veil of illusion the Allies had woven so carefully. Then, at dawn on June 6, 1944, the illusion shattered with the brutality of a nightmare becoming real. The doors of Higgins boats opened on beaches with somber code names: Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juno, Sword. The storm of steel and fire unleashed on the first wave was so indescribably violent that surviving it was a miracle. This was the blood price of the illusion. While young men fell in the red waters of Omaha, the great German war machine remained largely paralyzed, its eyes still fixed eastward, on the phantom in Calais, waiting obediently for an attack that would never, ever come. Operation Fortitude was a resounding success. It did not win the battle on the beaches. This was won by raw courage, supreme sacrifice, and the fierce determination of the soldiers who fought and died on those sands. But the bluff ensured that the battle could be fought at all. It kept the dreaded Panzer spearhead out of the fight during the 72 most crucial hours of modern conflict, allowing the Allies to secure a precarious, bloody, but vital foothold on the European continent. It was the farce that allowed the tragedy to end differently. In the days following D-Day, the ghost spectacle in Dover was quietly dismantled. The rubber tanks were deflated, their imposing shapes shrinking into insignificant heaps of canvas. The canvas aircraft were taken apart, the fake port disassembled. The anonymous film director and his team returned home, their work complete, their contribution to history invisible but decisive. Juan Pujol Garcia, the spy who deceived an empire with nothing but his intelligence and audacity, received the most ironic of honors, an Iron Cross from the Germans, still grateful for his service, and an Order of the British Empire, from the British equally grateful for having deceived them. He faded into obscurity, a true architect of the invisible. The war would continue for nearly another bloody year, costing millions of lives, but the success in Normandy, bought with deception and sealed with blood, was the beginning of the end. This story reminds us starkly that war is indeed a matter of brute force, overwhelming industrial power, and unshakable national will. But sometimes in the interstices between great clashes of armies, in the grey shadows where truth and fiction mingle, it is the most fragile ideas: a rubber tank carried under one man's arm, a false radio message typed in a silent room, the unwavering loyalty of a single man to an ideal of freedom that ultimately tipped the balance of fate. And when the last gun falls silent and the dust of history finally settles, what remains is not only the memory of carnage, but the silent and powerful testimony that the human mind possesses a supreme force, the ability to create, not only destroy, and to triumph, not only through overwhelming might, but through the most refined cunning.